Hi everyone, welcome back to another weapon review video. This version of 5.3 is giving us two new 5-star weapons, which include Mawika's signature Claymore and Tialali's signature Catalyst. We'll be covering what both these weapons do, and who else can best use them. As always, disclaimers, timestamps, social media links, and music credits are down below. Without further ado, let's get started. The first weapon is Mawika's Claymore, 1,000 Floating Dreams. Wait, 1,000 Blazing Suns. It's going to have a 741 base attack, along with an 11% crit rate bonus. For its passive, after the user uses a skill or burst, they gain 20% crit damage and 28% attack for 6 seconds. If elemental, normal, or charge attacks hit enemies, you can slowly extend this bonus by an additional 6 seconds, up to a max of a 12-second total duration. The bonus is increased by 75% if the user is in Night Soul Blessing, meaning the full bonus for Natlan units will be 35% crit damage and 49% attack. Being in Night Soul's Blessing also pauses the duration countdown if the user is off-field. When it comes to Mawika, this weapon is designed to synergize with both her on-field and off-field playstyle. Using her on-field allows her to use her motorcycle's attacks, and since they count as normal/charge attacks, they can extend the duration of the bonus. When she's off-field, she can't extend the duration, but she can pause it due to her being in Night Soul's Blessing. Being in Night Soul also improves her crit damage and attack bonus. For alternative users, it's a great stat stick for any attack scaling units. The crit rate is pretty low, but the base attack can make up for it in some cases. When it comes to on-fielders, you want to focus your attention on units with the ability to deal elemental basic attacks. My top pick for other Claymore users would be Navia. She can make use of all the stats very well. Her A1 passive infuses her attacks with Geo, which means she can gain the full extension. For the exact same reasons as a stat and infusion synergy, Diluc and Changyu can also use this weapon very well. Itto and Noelle can also proc the extension mechanic, but while their damage is technically attack scaling, it uses a defense stat and converts it into flat attack, so a higher base attack or attack percent isn't actually the most useful bonus. Changyu, Candice, and a C6 Bennett all have ways to infuse their fellow Claymore users who can't normally deal elemental auto attacks. This is a niche way to open up more options on characters using the weapon, because when a character isn't able to infuse their attacks, the uptime on this weapon is pretty bad. A couple examples of this include Eula or Razor. Eula has no way to infuse her damage, and the final hit of her burst doesn't snapshot. If you wait until the end of the burst's 7-second duration, you lose out on the weapon bonus's 6-second duration, and detonating the burst early means you're losing out on damage stacks. Either way, you can't fully use the weapon as intended. Razor's Wolf attacks with his normal attacks, but the damage of that is considered burst damage. Since its actual auto attacks are physical, he's not able to extend the duration on his own. Another thing about this weapon is that it comes with a 10-second cooldown, so characters who continuously recast their skill will be unable to refresh the bonus. For example, characters like Freminet, Gaming, and Kinich all have a way to recast their skills quickly, but the cooldown prevents them from extending that bonus on their own. Also, to avoid confusion, Freminet and Kenich's elemental attacks on their autos are both considered skill damage, so no, it won't be able to extend the duration. For off-field units, this weapon doesn't work with most of the units because none of them have Night Soul mechanics to pause the timer. Fortunately, we have a workaround. A couple characters are able to snapshot their abilities, meaning that the ability will continue to use the bonuses even after the stat increases disappear. There are 3 off-fielders who can best use this weapon. First up is Sayu. If you're running a support build, then the crit's not that useful, but the bonus attack does allow her to provide extra damage and healing, although, at higher constellations, EM is much more preferred. The second off-fielder who can snapshot is Dia. While her skill damage isn't the best, or good, she can make use of the weapon's passive without worrying too much about uptime. Here are some caveats you should know about. If you recast her skill or use her burst and reposition the field, it will re-snapshot her stats. If your goal is to maintain her damage buffs, you can't reposition the field in any way after the 6-second timer ends. Also, her burst is considered burst damage, not normal or charge attacks, so once again, it will not be a viable way to extend the timer. Finally, the last character is Beidou. Her burst is able to snapshot the bonus from this weapon, and with a 14-second duration, that effectively means you're capitalizing on the bonus by an additional 8 seconds past its original timer. This makes it a really great option for her. Final side note for her C4 allows her to deal additional instances of electro damage after taking hits. Despite it being synced to her normal and charge attacks, It's very similar to Razor's Wolf, where the damage typing seems to be labeled as burst damage, so for an on-field playstyle, her C4 likely won't extend the passive. To summarize, this weapon has pretty strict guidelines that limit users from unlocking its full potential, but the roster of characters who can partially capitalize on the passive and stats is still a reasonably long list. If you end up getting this weapon, you can rest assured that a good chunk of your favorite units should be able to make use of this weapon. Moving on, the other weapon is a new Citlali-centric catalyst, Starcaller's Watch. It has a 542 base attack and a 265 EM substat. For its passive, the user gains an additional 100 EM. When they create a shield, they gain a special effect that lasts for 15 seconds, in which the active character deals 28% more damage. This effect can only be triggered once every 14 seconds. Obviously, Citlali has some pretty good synergy with the catalyst. EM scaling shielder, what else is there to say? Unlike the Claymore, the catalyst is a lot more niche, and it doesn't have a crazy amount of viable users. There's two requirements to fully capitalize on the weapon: be EM scaling and be a shielder. We have EM scalers and we have shielders, but not a lot of characters who cover both of the categories. The new 4-star unit Lanyan is going to be one of the characters who fulfills both aspects. Her shielding is primarily attack scaling, but she does have a passive that increases her damage based on her EM stat. That means if you're running more of a reaction build, you'll want to have more EM. Of course, with her being a shielder, she can make use of the damage bonus for your team. She's also going to be a free option for this year's Lantern Rite, so even if you don't pull her on the character banner, you'll have a surefire way to snag a copy of her. Honestly, I think that EM scaling on her A4 also served as a way to give the new Catalyst some additional users, because if she didn't have that, only Citlali would make full use of the weapon, and that wouldn't make it a valuable pull for the weapon banner. But anyway, let's move on to some of the lesser recommended units for this weapon. Starting with EM scalers, Nahida and Sucrose are going to get a free 365 EM bonus just by having this weapon on board. It's all they can do with this weapon, but it might be nice, especially if you have nothing better to support your team. It also works well for Yai and Lisa, who just generally like the stat for their aggravate damage. And then Hydra units like Kokomi and Barbara can make use of the EM if they're being used in Bloom-centric teams. For shielders, we don't have any units dedicated to the role, but there are a couple of off-shielders. The first is Baizhu. He has little paper shields that are mainly there for interruption resistance, but they're shields nonetheless. He's also a Dendro unit, so if you're running him in a Quicken team, that extra EM can be pretty powerful. The other shielder is Yanfei, specifically a C4 Yanfei. She can work as a viable shielder for your team if you so choose, and even if you run her to DPS, she can make use of her own weapon passive. The 365 EM can be valuable for Vaporize, but overall, I wouldn't recommend this weapon over general damage-based ones if you're running the DPS build. A little niche option is Ningguang. I did a bit of digging and found out that Jadefall Splendor, Baiju's signature weapon, has a shield passive that will count for crystallized shields, so by proxy, Starcaller should also proc the passive for her. Considering the fact that Ningguang's more of a DPS, I wouldn't say this weapon is amazing for her, but if you want to mess around with a support build, the EM stat will be helpful in reinforcing crystallized shields, and the passive provides a nice damage bonus for your main DPS. One other thing I will mention for the passive, I am 98% sure the bonus will remain even if the shield breaks. From how this is worded, the damage bonus activates upon creating a shield, and it says nothing about it disappearing when the shield does. So even if the shield breaks early, or you run it on Baizhu who constantly replaces the shield, there shouldn't be any problems with maintaining the bonus uptime, which is a nice quality of life aspect. To quickly summarize the whole video, Malwika's weapon will be viable on a good chunk of the Claymore users, so you'll have options to work with. Just understand that Malwika is the only one who can utilize the full bonus of this weapon. Citlali's weapon is a lot more niche, but this patch will have Lantern Rite, which will include Lanyan as a free option. So even if you get this weapon on a failed 50-50, you can rest assured that she will be able to make great use of it. Alright, that's gonna do it for this weapon review. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribing to support the channel. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on these weapons, whether you'll pull for them, and who you might plan to use it on. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye!